Everybody understands that stress can have such a negative impact on our lives, but very few people recognize the effects that stress is having in their own life.
Introducing the Paramena Bliss Podcast, a show dedicated to unraveling the mysteries of achieving optimal health naturally as you transition into perimenopause and menopause. Get ready to join your host, Dr. Seth Yates, an experienced naturopathic doctor, acupuncturist, and kinesiologist, as he shares his wealth of knowledge acquired from over 40,000 patient visits and 15 years in working with perimenopausal females. Welcome to the Paramena Bliss Podcast.
Hey, this is Doc Yates. Welcome to the Perimental Bliss Podcast, brought to you by perimentalbliss.com. And today I want to talk about 7 key things when it comes to stress and your health, and that you're going to be better off by understanding these, because it will help you recognize how stress can be affecting you, what symptoms you have could be related to stress, and then what to do about it. So let's just jump right in so we can get to some answers. Number one of the big signs that you will see with stress is that people have had an issue ever since a certain period of time. And that's the first thing I'll ask. So, like, when did this start? And they're like, oh, this started. And in this case, they almost always have a very defined set of period of time. They're like, oh, this started exactly 7 months ago. Perfect. What happened around 8 months ago that was stressing you out? And almost always, it's going to be a big stressor too. So a lot of this is not like little accumulated stress like, oh, it was busy, I had to get groceries, then I had to go drive the kids to hockey and soccer. I'm not saying that that's not stressful, but a lot of these times when you're seeing that ever since stress, it's big stress, like a major work change. One of the biggest stressors by far that I see for clients, it's separations and divorce. By far. And for both parties. One, because often they weren't expecting it. The other one, maybe because they thought everything was great, and then they realized there was issues with their spouse they didn't know about. Maybe the lawyers, they have a tendency to get involved and draw everything out so that they can get paid way more and you suffer more. Either way, it's a major stress for families. So if there was any type of big stressor like that, you've got to go back and start putting it together. And then we'll discuss the next steps. And things that you will see, common things, that stress reactions that you'll see to these big stressors: work changes, separations, a death of a family member is a really big one. Death of a parent, even more so of a child. But sleep disturbances is a big one. So as compared to a hormonal sleep disturbance, which we've talked about a lot, where you're kind of waking up in the middle of the night, generally 1 to 3 in the morning. In this case, you have difficulty often falling asleep, and then if you're waking up, it's probably more around 3:30 to 5 in the morning, because that's when your cortisol rises naturally from your circadian rhythms, and it's probably peaking higher than what it used to, and that will wake people up. So problems falling asleep that started around that time, and problems staying asleep when you're waking up early in the morning. These are very classic signs of the body's reaction to stress. Now, sometimes you'll see things that kind of trickle down from that. They're like, oh, I've been really tired. Okay, how long have you been tired? 4 months. Okay, how's your sleep? Bad. How long has your sleep been a problem? For about 6 months. What happened around 7 months ago? Oh, someone passed away in my family. I lost my mom. So just keep tying it back. Another big thing, you'll see digestive issues flare up. A lot of muscle tension. People that get these chronic muscle tension built in. These are all signs of stress accumulating in your body. Now, the second thing that confuses people about stress is the symptoms that can happen after the stress is resolved. So a lot of times people come in like, I am completely exhausted. And I'm like, oh, well, is there anything that's been stressing you out? They're like, well, this was going on. I went through this big work change and moved, but that happened like 6 months ago, and I've been tired now for the last, couple months. When the body is under stress, think of your body as being like jacked up on adrenaline. Just like that movie. What was that movie? Like Jason Statham. He's like, he has jacked up on adrenaline all the time. As long as you're under stress, and it's a higher stress, your body will keep putting out cortisol and keep putting out adrenaline. And at that point, you're not sleeping well, but you're still kind of wired up. Once the stress is resolved, all of a sudden, that's where the burnout happens. So it's not as often that people are undergoing a long enough, big enough stress that the burnout happens during stress. It's the resolution is when people get the negative effect. That's when people crash. I always give the example, students don't get sick during exams. It's the moment they're done their last exams and the resolution of that stress, that's when they get sick. That's when they feel wiped out. And the stress of an exam compared to the stress of a big life change, not even comparable. So if you put it in perspective, you can understand how much of an effect that would have on you. Number 3, the third thing to consider about stress is that sometimes the stress is the trigger that's pulled, and there's certain things that will cascade down after that even when the stress is resolved, you have to treat these other things. A classic example of that would be food sensitivities. People will be like, I never had any food sensitivities before. I'm like, well, you clearly have them now, and we've tested them, and then we've removed them, and then they feel better. And then at that point, they're pondering, well, why do I all of a sudden get these food sensitivities? And the biggest things that I see in practice that cause food sensitivities is a major stressor, or heavy antibiotic use. Those are two of the biggest triggers that I see that will cause food sensitivities to develop. So even though the stress is gone, you still have to do work to correct the sensitivities after. And that's where stress, as I said before, it can be the trigger. And once the trigger is pulled, there's no going back. You're not stopping the bullet. We're repairing the damage. Number 4, the adrenals. I remember reading once, which I thought was ridiculous. There was a doctor saying, he's like, you know what? I think aspirin is so good that aspirin should be in the drinking water. Everyone should be having aspirin. There's so many benefits to aspirin. And I remember thinking, like, there's so many side effects to aspirin. Why would you ever want to put that in the drinking water of all the things? Now, the one thing I would say, though I wouldn't say you'd want to put it in the drinking water, maybe put in some herbal teas, but adrenal support is something that you should be considering long term. It's a busy, I don't know, especially if you're in North America, it's a busy lifestyle. It's a busy culture. Everyone's on the go all the time. And yes, the answer probably is to slow down more, but sometimes that's difficult to do. So in those situations, you should always be doing some work to help support your adrenals. Sometimes supporting your adrenals are herbs that help give you energy. I find a lot of the times, though, we have to use herbs that support someone's adrenals and help them slow down at night. So you give them adrenal support herbs that also induce a deeper sleep, and sleep has got to be one of the most important things for the body to recover. So make sure you're doing some sort of adrenal support, whether you're in the stress or whether you've had stress. It's like taking probiotics after antibiotics. Taking adrenal support after a stress or during a stress is very important. Number 5, what are your coping strategies for dealing with stress? And you might want to adjust those coping strategies depending on the effects that stress is having on you. So if your stress is causing a lot of muscle tension, I think one of the things you need to build in is a lot more exercise to help get things loosened up so we can kill 2 birds with 1 stone. If your stress is leading to a lot of overwhelming thoughts, then probably counseling and talking it out is going to be more helpful. If stress is leading to a lot of digestive issues, maybe use some adrenal support herbs that are also digestive aids, like a licorice extract. So you want to adjust your coping strategy to something that works well for you, that you feel comfortable with and you find more relaxing, but also if you can fine-tune it so it's works specifically for the way your body's responding to the stress, bonus points. Number 6, acupuncture is amazing for stress and anxiety and the effects of stress. They always talk about what's the straw that broke the camel's back. It's like you're just putting more and more and more on until eventually you give out. So if you're acupuncture, it's like taking the straw off. All those little extra layers of things that you're carrying around from an emotional standpoint that you don't need to be carrying around, but it's still kind of adding to the burden on your body so that little stressors feel like big stressors. acupuncture is incredible for that. And it's such a simple approach that any acupuncturist could easily do this. So acupuncture, if you're not using it, if you haven't used it, look into it. Number 7, the final most important point, don't dwell on things that you can't change. There's so many times that people will be a relationship that went bad and they're still dwelling on it years later. The position that they wanted at work and they couldn't get, a house that they wanted, something happened, a parent passed away. These are all things that suck. They're terrible. But you can't change it. And dwelling on something that you can't change it's almost like doing the same thing over and over again, hoping for a different result. It's just not going to happen. There's nothing you can do about it. Those are the things that you need to find ways to move on. It's not saying that you're trying to completely forget about it, but just don't dwell on it and let it become a continuous issue, someone who's just stuck there. And everyone around you sees it, and they want to see you kind of swim and move on and keep going, and you're just trying to tread water in the same spot. It's like you're fighting the current the whole time. Move on. Easier said than done, but extremely important. So those are 7 key steps for identifying, managing, dealing with stress that I hope you can start. If you're struggling with that and you're starting to recognize some of these own patterns in your own life, I hope this would be helpful and you can start incorporating some of these strategies right now. This is Doc Yates signing off.
Thank you for tuning in to the Paramena Bliss podcast. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button and visit paramenobliss.com for more valuable information on how you can thrive during your transition through perimenopause. Join our community of like-minded women who are dedicated to achieving optimal health naturally, and stay up to date with the latest tips, tricks, and advice from Dr. Seth Yates. And we'll catch you on the next episode of the Paramena Bliss podcast.